So you have accepted the truth. Star Wars is dead. You don't know the power of the mouse. You must defend the movie like you did the first two. It's the only way you can save your sequels. Let the past die. Kill it, if you have to.
Oh shit, here we go again.
I'm not gonna lie, this video feels like the end of an era. I gotta tell you, if you told me a year ago that this movie would have played out the way it did, and not to mention the fact I haven't been able to safely leave my house in 5 months, I wouldn't believe you, but here we are. The Rise of Skywalker, well, I'll just come out and say it. As a film, it's not good. Making an essay trying to defend this movie would be so intellectually dishonest and cherry-picking on my part that we could be banned from ever practicing science again. Now, don't get me wrong, the film isn't the worst thing ever made. I mean, I'd rather watch this over putting a pencil through my brain, but that review slogan really wouldn't sell tickets, so I can't blame Disney for never getting back to my email. For those of you who are new, my name is Thomas, and I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. I own 2 Ultra Sabers, know these movies like the back of my hand, and I could tell you every single Sith in Star Wars' expanded universe, starting from Darth Bane, and to boot, I'm almost finished a physics degree. To say I'm a bit of a nerd would be an understatement. I've already made one video essay on why I believe The Force Awakens is great, and then a sequel on why The Last Jedi is great as well, albeit for very different reasons. With this in mind, I can't really justify saying this film is great without wanting to wash my mouth out with paint thinner, but I think it's a worthy endeavor to examine what works in this film, as yes, there are functioning elements that resemble a movie. Perhaps even more importantly though, I'm going to break form with my previous 2 videos, and I'm going to look at all the things that imploded this film in on itself, that being from a structural, major perspective, as well as suggesting multiple simple fixes along the way that could have avoided these pitfalls. Afterwards, I'll be discussing the production problems, corporate influences, and contributors that led to this trilogy being considered a failure despite having great moments, as well as why I believe a lot of people don't understand what caused this trilogy to flop fundamentally. Finally, I'll wrap up with a discussion of the state of the franchise, whether or not this trilogy has value, and all that, because I really have found myself going through a crisis of Star Wars faith due to how horribly this movie seemed to tank the trilogy, and I only recently came to a conclusion that inspired me to finish this trilogy in the first place. I would request that you guys stay nice and polite in the comments again. My last 2 videos have shown me the best sides of people from all around these films, and I can only hope that you guys continue the good spirit in the comments here as well. Please be sure to check out the other 2 episodes in this series for a maximum amount of comprehension, and remember that I'm probably going to say stuff that people from both sides of this discussion are going to disagree with at some point, so I only ask that you guys give my opinions a chance and enjoy the ride, and oh boy, let me tell you, buckle the fuck up, because it's a bumpy ride. Oh god.
What is he asking for in return? Does that...
Prepare to crush any worlds that defy us. My knights and I are going hunting for the scavenger.
So, before I talk about my many issues with this movie, I should probably acknowledge what I liked, because there were some things that I liked. I liked the villain, I liked some of the de-aging special effects, I liked C-3PO, I like that commercial for a new triple beef and cheddar Arby's burger with beefy goodness topped. Okay, in all seriousness, this movie does get some stuff right. So to all 4 of you who this is going to surprise, the majority of this movie's strengths come from Adam Driver with his portrayal of Kylo Ren. From the intense opening scene of the movie, to his violent murder of one of his officers, or the fact that he absolutely dogpiles Rey in their lightsaber fight, Ben Solo is carrying the intrigue and plot of this movie single-handedly. The man is such a great actor, and it's a shame that the pressure of carrying this film permanently broke all of his vertebrae and paralyzed him from the neck down. All jokes aside though, Kylo Ren really does all the heavy lifting in this film. So it's no secret from my Last Jedi video that I loved the Kylo Ren arc from the first 2 films. I thought the character was going in a new and interesting direction, and boy was I pissed when I saw this movie do a complete 180. However, just because the movie did something I didn't like, that isn't the reason that it was bad. I rewatched this movie multiple times with a pen and paper trying to find things I liked, and literally 83% of my positive comments came from the fact that Kylo Ren was the best thing about this film in one way or another. I've literally calculated this out, and I wasn't even surprised by the outcome. We pick up with Kylo Ren leading the First Order as Supreme Leader, reforging his helmet, and finally becoming the true evil we were promised. However, within a matter of minutes, this is thrown off when the somehow alive Emperor Palpatine sends him after Rey to kill her. It's stupid, but Adam's acting is the only reason I bought any of it. As for Kylo Ren, Driver brings an absolute ferocity and untamed animal-like performance that is evident in the way he addresses everyone. Instead of underhinting fear behind his words like he did in the first movie, he's commanding, firm, and dominant. However, as I'll explain later, this has nothing to do with the writing. This is all Adam Driver's acting. Another little thing this film does is it establishes how Ben Solo is more powerful than Rey. He overpowers her mind and invades her space multiple times. He can best her in lightsaber combat, and even is the first to rise after both of them had their literal life force drained by the Emperor. This film seems to suddenly remember that Kylo Ren is supposed to be in the third act of his character arc, and I really liked that the canon confirmation of him being more powerful than Rey finally was delivered, because it was pretty blatantly missing from The Last Jedi, to be frank. My favorite bit from Ben Solo is where we see him coming to rescue Rey, but at this point I'm running out of good things to say about Kylo Ren, and the sad thing is that it has nothing to do with Adam Driver. I'll just come out and say it. The writing sucks. I've seen better writing in a Family Guy episode, and that's not a joke. There was no point in making this movie if you were going to do a worse version of Return of the Jedi, but since they gave Driver no choice, he did the best with the terrible material he was given. It's hard writing this part of the review because I genuinely didn't like mostly anything the film did with his character due to how it violated the tone and characterization, but I still loved seeing the actor who brought it to the page with a small modicum of dignity, which is really impressive all things considered. There's only one scene in this film that I would say is worthy of main saga contribution, and despite how you all know what it is, we're not going to talk about it quite yet. In this film, we get an expanded look at the Force connection established in The Last Jedi, and I really appreciate the direction this film took. We get to see them explore environments that they're in, transfer objects, and stalk each other through long-range Skype calls. It's a new power that has finally been expanded from The Last Jedi into a world of its own, and it really works well to add something new to the Force that respects the axioms of the universe. The Rise of Skywalker in general tries a lot of new things with the Force, and this is one of the ones that works. It adds an element of tension to the film without contradicting fundamental ideas in movies before. Trust me, the major second power to this movie is going in the complete opposite direction, so we'll get to that when we get to that. Force freezing or Jedi doing high jumps is one thing, but I always wanted to see two Force users rip a spaceship out of the sky, but to that end, the movie succeeded. From having Kylo and Rey jump 60 feet in the air and getting slammed with waves during lightsaber fights, or Palpatine's ridiculous Force lightning power, or Rey being able to get her lightsaber caught by Kylo Ren with the Force, or Kylo being able to reverse chokeslam his own men into the ceiling, the Force seems a lot more unleashed in this film. Don't worry, I'll be here all night. God, this is going to be such a bitch to edit. Another thing I enjoy in this movie is Daisy Ridley's performance as Rey, as well as the marginal amount of effort they put into her character. Rey was training in the years since The Last Jedi, and I'm glad that they actually bothered to show it. And I'm glad they had Leia be the one to right Luke's wrongs, as it felt like a very respectful use of Carrie Fisher's likeness, because Rian left her character with somewhere to go in the last movie, and unfortunately, her passing really inhibited their options. If you're gonna have Rey try and rip a spaceship out of the sky, you better show us some evidence that this girl knows what a Jedi even is, and to that end, this film succeeded. In addition, Rey finally gets to have the slightest tinge of self-doubt instead of assuming she entered all the cheat codes into the galaxy and could go on an infinite rampage. There's no kicking down the door to Snoke's chamber, nor is there picking a fight with Kylo Ren. Rey is frequently on the run and doubting her own motivations. They highlight the fact that Rey's fighting has been repeatedly aggressive and ruthless throughout the trilogy, and it's nice to see that someone finally recognized that a Jedi shouldn't be screaming in the middle of a lightsaber fight. That seems like more of a Sith thing to do. To be fair, They don't fix it, but, you know, I'll take what I can get in this movie due to how much I really gotta get through later. Like, I don't think I bought that crap about Rey thinking about defecting to the dark side for a single second, but, I mean, shit, at least they're trying. Rey fights with more aggression in this film and The Last Jedi than Kylo ever did, so it's not like the idea they were going for was unfounded, it was just very poorly executed. The film also realized that General Hux's character was completely ruined during the runtime of The Last Jedi, and wisely decided to do away with the character and replace his role with that of General Pryde, who is probably my favorite Imperial-esque general in the whole saga other than Tarkin. He has a presence that isn't played off for laughs, which is good. It's sad to say that people who get paid millions of dollars to write films didn't know this, but it's a good idea to not have your antagonist be a complete joke. Finally, there's a single scene in this film that actually warrants watching it, and it's the scene where Ben Solo comes back and is redeemed. A humiliated and conflicted Ben Solo stares off at the waters below, and Harrison Ford shows up to collect a $10 billion check from the Disney Corporation. Han Solo shows up to attempt to redeem his son on the bridge, but it isn't really Han. It's instead implied to be Ben Solo's subconscious. Sure, this is a major missed opportunity to have Hayden Christensen reprise his role as Anakin, but I'll touch on that character's molestation later. Ben and Han share a dialogue very reminiscent of his murder speech in The Force Awakens, and after much pain, Ben cries and throws his lightsaber into the water. It's a very tasteful use of callbacks in this film.
I want to be free of this pain. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
When Ben calls Han Solo Dad, it breaks my heart every time, and it's all due to the natural chemistry between these two actors, as well as their great character relationship built over the course of The Force Awakens. In fact, it makes me really angry that we didn't get a movie that took place in between episodes 6 and 7, because there's so much unmined character moments between the original cast and Ben Solo that nobody even bothered to look into portraying at all. When the best scene in this movie, though, serves as a tasteful coda to The Force Awakens, and the film has no substantial original scenes to contribute, you know we're in for a bumpy ride, right? Like, that's not a good sign. Nonetheless, I gotta call out a good thing where I see it, and this was a beautiful scene that tributed both Ben Solo and Han, and it's a very effective way to turn Ben to the light side. It also made me realize that Harrison Ford seems to be the only character that escaped this trilogy without being completely ruined in the eyes of some fans and more or less completely praised, so I guess Harrison Ford should take his wins where he gets them. As much as I wish Anakin was the one to redeem Ben Solo, he doesn't know Anakin from an Arby's beef and cheddar. His love for Han and guilt over the death of his father is the one thoroughfare to all three films, so it makes a lot of sense that his link to his father should play a component in his redemption. However, this moment would have no punch at all were it not for the fact it looms so heavily on The Force Awakens. It also was allegedly a Pepsi Zero version of the Pepsi that existed in the original cut, for sake of a metaphor, but we'll talk about that later. In short, essentially it was supposed to be Leia projecting Han, but nonetheless, we'll get there later. There's some little stuff I enjoy as well with this movie. Poe, Finn, and Chewie actually get captured at one point. The First Order straight up subjugates civilians and planets, which is nice to see. Luke's scene was a nice callback to The Empire Strikes Back, and I really liked the retcon of Leia being trained by Luke as a Jedi. Well, yeah, that's it. That's all the good things I have to say about this movie, and we're about 9 minutes in. The opening was cool, Ben Solo was fun, and Carrie Fisher was done tastefully, the dyad was great, and General Pryde was pretty cool. But, yeah, that's it. At least this movie is kind enough to prequel fans to acknowledge the Sith and Old Republic as canon, but, I mean, at this point I'm reaching. As much as I would like to call this video a defense, I really can't justify defending any more in this movie, or else I'll lose all respect I have for myself.
You're a whore. You're a stupid whore for Disney. Look at you. Look at you.
Anakin, you're breaking my heart. You're going down a path I can't follow.
Because of Obi-Wan.
From the first 5 minutes of this movie, it is painfully obvious that this movie is a train wreck and a middle finger to The Last Jedi. Now, for the purposes of this video, I'm not going to tell you if the choices made by The Last Jedi were good or not, because number one, I made a 30-minute video on that, and number two, the opinions on the last film are completely irrelevant for the purposes of this discussion. Allow me a clearly expert voice on filmmaking, given my zero credentials and extensive high school musical theater, to provide some insight to the idiots who drafted this trilogy, or lack of drafting thereof.
And it confirms the worst. Somehow Palpatine returned.
What? You are telling a cohesive narrative. You cannot spend half of your sequel trying to retroactively undo your perceived mistakes and start over. It's a waste of time and you're gonna piss some people off.
Wait, I can do this. Wait, hold on.
The reactionary tone that this movie took was so offensively mediocre and took so few risks that it somehow managed to piss everyone off. Good job! No one liked your movie. Look, when you fail a test in high school or college, the answer is you roll with the score going forward and compensate on future exams by doing better, not to retake the exam that you just failed. That's not even an option at most universities. My first issue that I take with this film is the decision to make the entire movie a fetch quest. A final movie should be where your characters are being pushed to the limit. Don't spend your time screwing around because it's time for raised stakes and series-long payoffs, especially if you are the trilogy to a trilogy. Allow me to explain some films that do this concept well. Return of the Jedi, Revenge of the Sith, Bill and Ted Face the Music, The Dark Knight Rises, Daredevil Season 3, and so on. Knowing this basic advice from a first-year film student I contacted at my university, I'm assuming the writers wanted to do this.
Opening night.
Well, they didn't want to do this. They logically decided to make the characters chase MacGuffins and waste their entire runtime. Now, I'm not going to be that pedantic dude on the internet who tells you what you already know. C-3PO not being able to speak Sith was a dumb runtime extender. The dagger outlining the Death Star was so stupid, I swear it triggered onset Alzheimer's in 40% of viewers, and Palpatine couldn't decide if he wanted Rey alive or dead for the life of him. It's like the guy didn't even read his own script, but we'll get to that later. The film is riddled with plot holes and nitpickable moments, so much so that I have literally 9.5 pages in front of me from my second viewing alone. This video isn't for that. I'm not here to make a living trashing this film. I'm more interested in the physiology and kinesiology of why it failed. Because I still love Star Wars, and I don't want to be that guy that ruins your enjoyment of the film. The issue with this movie is more fundamental. By overcramming the plot with busy work and MacGuffins, it was a lazy attempt by the writers to distract you from the fact that aside from Kylo Ren, we don't give a shit about any of these characters due to the direction they were taken in during the course of 2 movies, and this isn't necessarily the problem, right? Finn was sent on a side quest with Rose and did his own thing. Rey became too powerful too fast and was never around the principal cast aside from Adam Driver. Poe was there for 2 shots of the first film and, had his stupid character arc that went nowhere in The Last Jedi, and Rose was literally sent back to the kitchen during this movie. These characters don't know each other at all. They don't have chemistry, and we're not invested in their chemistry as a group. So why are you going to go with a group dynamic and rip off Return of the Jedi? See, C-3PO literally never spoke to some of these characters before this movie. You couldn't have come up with any better ideas? You're fucking Disney. You have access to the smartest writers in the world. Well, why does this character with a 3-film arc only have 20 minutes of screen time? Why did we introduce another love interest for Finn? Who the fuck are you? Look, another fundamental issue I have is that this movie is desperate to virtue signal to demographics, which I find really pandering. Various characters are just jammed into this movie where they don't fit. They have 8 minutes or less of screen time that actively contributes to their motivations and arcs, where they're not firing a gun or riding a horse, and they're used just for diversity points or meme culture. Allow me to speak directly to the board who wrote and supervised this movie. You are in the 3rd and final entry of your films. In this trilogy, that is. And not only that, you're also in the 9th and final entry in an entire saga that spans generations. This should be a non-stop ride of character emotions and payoffs that some people have been waiting for over 40 years. You don't have the time to establish 4 new characters with motivations and arcs in your trilogy who have dialogue. Those being Zori, General Pride, Janna, and Lando. You don't have time for this. Are SJW politics the problem?
Oh, I don't think so.
No, and you're a prick if you think an extra black character or female character is the problem. It wouldn't have mattered if Janna was white, black, Indian, or an alien. It really wouldn't have. If anything, the minorities being represented in these films deserve better treatment because they shouldn't be viewed as pandering demographic ticket sellers. If Rey was a male or Finn was white, these issues would still be there, so do not blame this on liberal politics or SJW shit or Bernie Sanders. You're just wrong. These expedited character arcs and meaningless fetch quests bring plot holes that are abundant in this film to the surface because we're not invested in these characters or their trifles. We don't know anything about Janna, and we don't have any payoffs for characters that have been around for 4 years, so seeing plot holes they bother us. Look, plot holes don't ruin films if the surrounding film is strong enough to support the plot holes, and my best example of this would be one of the most famous movies. Well, no, it's a minor movie. It didn't really get any attention. Maybe you might or might not have heard of it. It's only The Dark Knight.
Let's put a smile on that face.
Listen, The Dark Knight is riddled with plot holes, and I want to take a specific scene from the movie, which is one of the best in the entire film, and talk about why the plot holes don't matter. Spoilers if you haven't seen The Dark Knight. Like, if you what are you doing? Turn this video off. Go watch The Dark Knight. The Joker gets locked up in the MCU because he failed to predict Batman wasn't Harvey Dent during the rescue sequence, but yet he wanted to be locked up in the MCU, which would imply he knew Harvey Dent wasn't Batman because he already had Harvey Dent and Rachel Dawes arrested by police who were pre-planted in Gordon's unit? As if this isn't bad enough, Joker somehow predicted Batman would be in his interrogation cell to give him the information on where Harvey and Rachel are, and he knew how to plant a phone bomb into a prisoner with such timing that he would be in perfect blast vicinity to kill every cop in the precinct because the precinct is half empty because he got Harvey and Rachel captured in the first place? What? However, what makes it great is the character's psychology, because you see, the Joker knew that Batman would prioritize Rachel based off their prior interaction when he threw her out a window, and on top of that, it makes for a great dramatic moment when the Joker blows up the precinct and Harvey Dent gets mutilated. Despite the plot making no logical sense when you throw it up on a chalkboard, the character's psychology and fantastic filmmaking make it an absolute triumph. Look for yourself. Why am I talking about Rise of Skywalker when I could be watching The Dark Knight? What the fuck? What am I doing with my... Why am I here? Look, plot holes don't ruin a movie if you're adequately invested in character relationships and struggles, but good luck finding it in this movie because there's none of it. Because Rey and Kylo Ren are the only two characters with any sort of chemistry, their scenes are literally the only highlights in this movie, and every scene that isn't of them is an absolute drag and inconvenience to get through due to poor dialogue, static shot framing, and absolutely nonsense plot holes that are just exacerbated by all the previous issues. It's why this film took me 5 days to get through on my first non-theater viewing, because this plot was so awful and poor that it just dragged, and there were so few character relationships that actually existed in this movie that there was nothing of value to care about. It felt like I was watching paint dry. By the time Lando's stupidly convenient introduction happens, I thought I was like 45 minutes in, and I was floored to see that I was only 21 minutes, and I had already gone through 3 beers. Even worse, they completely do a 180 on Kylo Ren's progression toward true evil, and they redeem him overnight just for the sake of doing it. I mean, they did a decent enough job. Like, if you were going to drive the wrong way down the expressway, I mean, I guess you didn't hit any cars, but once again, if all you were going to do was do a worse retelling of the original trilogy's plotline, why did you make this trilogy in the first place? But this half-assed Return of the Jedi impression isn't just bad, it's insulting. And the only reason it isn't outright deplorable like the rest of this film is because Adam Driver is such a good actor, it's hard to hate him. He carries the subpar material into mediocrity, which, I mean, look, that's a feat in and of itself, and the man got unlucky when he lost Best Actor to Joaquin Phoenix. As if it wasn't bad enough that this film on its own is incompetent, the film somehow manages to get even worse. Oh god, I'm only halfway through talking about the issues. What am I doing here?
I am all the Sith.
The easiest issue to point out with this movie is Emperor Palpatine's return, and how this plot point drags its balls all over the legacy and reputation of the saga, as well as trivializing the narrative of this trilogy itself. The theme of the sequel trilogy is most likely identity, if I had to put my finger on it, as each film deals with Rey and Kylo debating their place in the world. For that reason, this film seems to fundamentally misunderstand and jumble the ideas of identity that were planted within The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. These two movies painted the picture of a nobody growing up on Jakku who had to make her own destiny in the galaxy, and a hero born from cursed lineage who was corrupted and turned to the dark side. Then they form this connection, and by the time that this movie comes along, they completely swap their backstories and motivations. The original idea was that these characters were living in a world dictated by those who came before them, and The Last Jedi left our two main characters in a position to finally forge the destiny of the galaxy for themselves. By introducing Palpatine into this movie, you've literally ruined all of it. Not only do you demote Kylo Ren back from formerly being the ultimate baddie of the saga to now being the lapdog of yet another old man, but you also make it so that Rey is now, in fact, defined by her heritage instead of not being defined by her heritage. It's almost as if these two characters completely switched places. Her quest for finding her own meaning had no value at all because, she had a high midichlorian count. There were 2 points in this movie where my audience booed into the theater on opening night, even throwing popcorn. I was pretty annoyed given the fact it went down the back of my shirt, but beside from that, it was when Rey and Kylo kissed, and then when Rey called herself a Skywalker. The first moment was just all around stupid, and to be fair, I called it back in The Last Jedi's video. The two of them should not be in any kind of romantic relationship. However, the one I'd like to focus on is why Rey calling herself a Skywalker fails miserably and violates the tone of the previous two films and even the entire saga, and even this film. Jesus Christ, this film is poorly written. So, allow me to be candid for a second. I haven't seen one of my parents in years. They were very abusive, and I'll leave it at that, but needless to say, I'm glad they're not in my life anymore. But this person took a lot from me when I was a kid, and I struggled with identity much like Rey did. I didn't like my last name, and I was ashamed of who I was. It wasn't until I met my friends and girlfriends that have come and gone in my life that I realized for myself, your family isn't decided based off who you're related to. Family comes from within. And family are the people who care about you and who you care about as well. If someone would show up to help you move on short notice, raise you lovingly, help you pay a bill if you're short, or text you if you don't show up to class, or helps you blow up the Death Star when you're running a little short on time, that's your family. I apologize for getting existential, but I really think it's necessary to understand precisely why Rey calling herself a Skywalker does not work at all. Rey never learned the true meaning of family in these three movies. She says the line because they needed to justify the title of the movie, or because the producers had no respect for the weight of this moment, which probably it's both. She never got her ass saved by the boys, never even knew the Skywalkers for more than 2 years, not to mention knowing she was a Palpatine for about a week. If anything, she identified more with the Solos than she did. She should have called herself Rey Solo. She never has any of the emotional weight that she needed to pull this moment off. If this was truly the route they wanted to go down, which it wasn't, I'll explain why later, they literally should have just had her be a Palpatine hiding from day one. That way you could have her possibly start out as the same antisocial scavenger we met in The Force Awakens, and have her grow into a character that values her friends and bonds more than her lineage, thus learning the true meaning of family through the sacrifice of characters like Finn and Luke and even Ben Solo. After barely struggling for anything over 3 films, having it handed to her, never having issues with letting people in or being liked, Rey's attempt at being a Skywalker fails to be heartwarming, and instead, it feels like this hostile corporate takeover of what was once a dignified trilogy at the beginning, ripping the mask off the Disney Corporation once and for all and showing us that, despite its high moments, this trilogy was nothing but a cash grab in retrospect. However, the film doesn't just stop at unintentionally ruining the legacy of the trilogy, but instead decides it wants to ruin the long-standing legacy of the whole saga as well. And this was done by including Emperor Palpatine and specifically excluding other characters. Now here's the thing, right? Emperor Palpatine was a character who has always been inextricably linked to both Vader and Anakin, and yes, I do refer to them as separate characters, even though they're the same person. Ever since his introduction by reference in A New Hope, it's been crystal clear that the Emperor kept Vader on a leash. Then we get Empire in Return of the Jedi, where we learn that the Emperor is implied to have trained Vader and uses him as a pawn and doesn't value him or his life at all. Vader completes his redemption arc by killing the Emperor and himself in the process. Rey's dumbass line to the Emperor of being all the Jedi does not work in this movie. Once again, it's no fault of Daisy Ridley's. This doesn't work because Palpatine, number one, literally is not all of the Sith, and if it is, wow, that's a contrived plot point that you pulled out of nowhere. And also, Rey just met this dude and is clearly trying to do her best Iron Man impression. The difference here is that Robert Downey Jr., he earned his one-liner over the course of 12 years, struggle, and the occasional defeat. And Thanos was being literal when he said he was inevitable. The dude literally wiped out 50% of the universe, and Iron Man used to struggle just to escape from a couple terrorists in a cave with a box of scraps. This was just a stupid line written by a boardroom executive saying, oh, do the Iron Man thing, do the Marvel. You can't do that in Star Wars. When the prequels came along, we learned that the Emperor preyed on a boy named Anakin Skywalker from his youth and exploited his resentment against the Jedi. This triggered a cycle of events that ended in Anakin falling, killing his wife, and becoming a slave trapped in a suit of armor. And if you're on board with that description, then you should also understand why this line that Rey says is so offensive. She is not all of the Jedi. Palpatine is not all of the Sith. You cannot construct Rey versus Palpatine as the ultimate be-all end-all of the saga if it completely violates the fact that the Emperor and Anakin were linked. They were created by George Lucas to be a duo. The prequels introduced this idea of a prophecy that Anakin would also bring balance to the Force, and look, I'm sure your local high school debate team could endlessly argue what that phrase even means, because the prophecy is kind of nonsensical and vague in the prequels, but the implication seems to be, one way or another, that killing Palpatine and himself brings balance to the galaxy. Did this include the Jedi? Did it include other Sith? Does it involve Macho Man Randy Savage? I'm not sure. I don't know. What matters is that Anakin's prophetic coming for thousands of years is tied directly to his actions in Return of the Jedi and Revenge of the Sith. If Palpatine lives in any way through the destruction of the Death Star, it trivializes Anakin's role in the saga, because it's clear that Palpatine was active during the time between Return of the Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. All Anakin did was stall the dude. I've seen it argued on Reddit and under forums that Palpatine surviving Episode 6 would not trivialize the entire 6 movies beforehand, and the argument that I've most often seen cited is that World War II existing wouldn't diminish the significance of World War I. But I think this is a fallacy, because, I have a very simple response to that. Hitler didn't kill Archduke Ferdinand, and Hitler arose from consequences surrounding the fallout of World War I. One existing does not diminish the other. Hitler did not survive the end of World War I because Hitler was not the conflict. This is why having Kylo Ren or Snoke as new players in the sequel trilogy is nice and legal, but bringing back Palpatine is not. It fundamentally violates what we were told about the previous movies. Like I said, I can respect the fact that the producers and writers were uncomfortable with the direction Rian took the franchise in, but you can't spend half your movie trying to undo the previous one and re-establish new rules. Not only does it seem to spit in the eye of your own trilogy, but also the entire saga. You see, by calling your film Episode 9, that comes with the implication that this is a continuation of an ongoing narrative, an idea that was mostly executed pretty faithfully until this film. This film is a finale where all elements are supposed to come together. The original trilogy characters are barely utilized, the prequels are referenced only through Easter eggs and ham-fisted dialogue, and the best character of the saga is dead at the end. Now, as aware as I am that trying to fix this movie seems like giving a get-better boo-boo kiss to a slit jugular, I'll be damned if I can't try. This captain is going down with his ship. The easiest fix that could have helped to the majority of the narrative issues in this film would be for Ben Solo to stay alive and Rey to stay dead. I know it seems like a dumb fix, but at the very least, a redeemed Ben Solo can live the rest of his life either in prison or trying to answer for his crimes, and Rey won't attempt to hijack the good name of Star Wars. Another fix to this film that I would put in would be to eliminate the force healing trick entirely. It is so disrespectful. The implication that force healing was a known and relatively simple force power to use literally ruins the premise of the 6 films before it. Like I said, I ain't here to nitpick. I'm not here to talk about the dagger outlining the Death Star. This isn't a nitpick. If you have Anakin Skywalker's entire motivation as a character over 3 films be the desire to learn to cheat death, why didn't he just force heal Padme? It was a simple enough problem if Ben could do it without any training. Why did Qui-Gon die? Come on, Obi-Wan, were you not studying? Why didn't Luke save his father in Return of the Jedi and just fucking grow his lungs back and fix all of his skin? Look, it's a stupid power, and it literally ruins the logic and thoroughfare of the previous films, and this issue goes far beyond some stupid, trite, nitpick convenience for finding a wayfinder. This movie's reliance on force healing literally calls the entire saga into question and breaks the rules set up by the universe. I understand that some nerds don't ever want force powers added that weren't there in the original 3 films. That's not what I'm saying. As a matter of fact, I really dug the high jumps and massive force strength feats. I think it was really original and a nice addition. The main issue here is that having force healing violates the axioms that your universe is set up in. The great thing about fiction is you can set up as many rules, patterns, and narrative flow as you want, as it's all legal and believable, provided you stick to those rules. When a new power or rule becomes disrespectful on a major writing issue, that's when you violated the very ideas and principles of your universe and no one believes it anymore. For those reasons and many others, The Rise of Skywalker is anything but great on its own. I actively never want to see this film again. Let me be clear, do I blame any of the actors and actresses? No, not at all. As a matter of fact, my heart goes out to each and every one of them because it damaged a substantial number of their careers. They're so incredibly talented, they poured every bit of heart and soul they could into this movie, and the same goes for the light riggers, costume people, mic operators, CGI artists, practical effects masters, Arby's beef and cheddar, etc. No, my friends, I'm afraid the cause of this movie's demise is a lot more sinister. And I'm about to play judge, jury, and executioner with the Walt Disney Corporation.
Joker chose me because you were the best of us. He wanted to prove that even someone as good as you could fall. You're the one pointing the gun, Harvey. So point it at the people responsible.
To properly understand how we got here, we have to understand how we got here. A redundant statement, to be sure, but important nonetheless. When George Lucas released his prequel trilogy, sure, a lot of people liked the 3rd movie, but for the most part, the trilogy was reviled in comparison to the original. The fanbase was pissed. A lot of people accused George Lucas of making the prequels to sell toys and video games, and on the surface level, a lot of people seem to be right. I mean, shit, I can't blame Lucas. LEGO made pretty much a set or video game or movie for every IP but in the book, such as Star Wars, Indiana Jones, Batman, Marvel, Harry Potter, and the Crucifixion of Jesus Christ. I don't agree with the notion that George made these movies soullessly. I just think that the major issue with the prequels is that Lucas shouldn't have directed them, and he should have sought help in the writing process. However, the reputation of Star Wars was very damaged after the prequels, and for whatever reason, George Lucas sold the IP to Disney in 2012, handing the reins over to a friend of his, Kathleen Kennedy. Now, if you're about to be one of those people who hates these movies because Kathleen Kennedy is an outspoken feminist,
I appreciate your input, but please, fuck off.
What'd he say?
He said fuck off. Come on, let's get out of here.
if you're on that train and think that SJWs are ruining media, go back to watching Ben Shapiro or Sargon of Akkad or Alex Jones or whatever alt-right bubble you came from, and please don't come back. The issue with these movies is not SJW politics or the fact that Finn is a black guy or that Rey is a female Jedi in a world full of male-dominated characters. Once again, I understand Rey was a poorly written character, but the fundamental issues with the trilogy are a lot deeper, and to just blame it on SJW politics is disingenuous. Star Wars deserves a better magnifying glass than that. The issue with Kathleen Kennedy is that she was so eager to produce a trilogy of movies, and even more so, to make money. The Force Awakens was announced right after the acquisition took place, and it was released less than 3 years later with JJ at the helm. It was a soft reboot, as requested by Kennedy, and performed very well critically and at the box office. I personally still believe The Force Awakens is one of the 3 best movies in the saga, despite its flaws. Rogue One similarly performs well, and after this, we get The Last Jedi. Now look, I stand by every word of what I said in defense of The Last Jedi. It's a decent film that ranks as a mid-tier Star Wars movie and feels like the only purposeful entry with any artistic vision in this trilogy, so to that end it deserves a lot of credit. To those that would say that you're making a Star Wars movie and you should make it according to a formula, no. The original trilogy and the prequels to a certain extent as well all came from an artistic vision and impassioned direction of where to take the saga. To that end, The Last Jedi has my respect, even though I didn't always like it. It was a visionary film, made by directorial genius, but he made it in a log cabin where nobody questioned his writing choices, and from ideas I loved, like the death of Snoke, to ideas I hated, like everything with Admiral Holdo and Poe, the fanbase couldn't seem to agree on anything in the film, and it split the fandom in two. Yes, its artful and defined vision is what makes me think it's great, but I understand why so many people have disdain for the film, provided it's not rooted in alt-right politics. So, what was the company, and by extension Kathleen Kennedy's, reaction to The Last Jedi? Hide from the public and rush the final film out. Well, that, and we got a Han Solo movie that nobody asked for. However, perhaps an even deeper issue is that they fundamentally did not draft an outline for the trilogy. Don't believe me? Listen to Daisy Ridley talking about her heritage herself. They didn't know who her parents were up until, like, halfway through making the final movie. They didn't have consistency within this script, let alone the other two.
Rey's secret from the beginning. Did you know about the parentage? Like, tell me about that journey of when you found out.
No. And then it came to episode 9, and JJ pitched me the film and was like, oh yeah, Palpatine's granddaddy. And I was like, awesome. And then 2 weeks later, he was like, oh, we're not sure. So it kept changing. So then even I was filming and I wasn't sure what the answer was going to be.
And the shenanigans, guys, they didn't end there. Certain characters like Finn, who may have been included for genuine reasons at first, wound up with disingenuine virtue signaling being their character, just for the sake of Disney saying they were inclusive. And it made the actors feel so exploited that John Boyega recently spoke up as well, stating that they had no idea what to do with his character, or Rose, or Maz Kanata, or other minorities, so they just threw them in the second two movies as diversity cards to market the film without giving a shit about the actors. He even came out and vocally said that working on these sequels was not a positive experience. So I guess my point with all of this would be they had no idea where to take the characters, no idea where to take the trilogy, and they were just kind of flying by the seat of their pants. But it isn't just that either. This goes far beyond pathetic money grubbing. Apparently, they brought Hayden Christensen on set, recorded scenes for the movie, and Kathleen Kennedy had them completely cut from the film. This isn't SJW politics or something stupid or the desire to see the white man scrubbed from films, and if you believe that, you're an incel dumbass. No, this is far more sinister, my friends, but I can understand why you might think that at first. The Last Jedi pissed off so many people that the decision-making process behind The Rise of Skywalker was to include nothing controversial or edgy to anybody, all while writing a story without an outline, plan, or artistic vision. Guys, you can't bake a cookie if you don't have a recipe and have no idea where to start. Look, am I saying that this woman deliberately sabotaged her business? No, of course not. Lady runs a business, and good old Bob Iger runs a business too. I mean, remember, George Lucas changed the name of The Revenge of the Jedi to Return of the Jedi to save money on printing, and Kathleen Kennedy reused assets from Rogue One so that they wouldn't have to redesign Star Destroyers in this film. I'm not holding frugality against them, but they put the almighty dollar before they put care into their script. Just like Rian Johnson or George Lucas say, what's the point in making a movie if you're just going to retread an old one? And look, another note on directors real quick. A lot of people like to put the blame on Rian Johnson or J.J. Abrams, but the blame doesn't go on them. They were given very little direction, with no inkling of where to take the saga, and told that this was completely within their artistic reins to do so. There was no plan, no strategy, no outline. It wouldn't matter if Rian Johnson was directing, or if Adam Sandler was directing, or if J.J. Abrams or even George Lucas was directing. There was no artistic consistency. The issue here is not that Rian Johnson hates men and wanted Rey to be a two-dimensional character. The issue here is not J.J. Abrams wanting to ruin everything and stick Palpatine in a movie. They had no idea where they were going with this film since day one, and that's a big problem.
I'm being torn apart. I want to be free of this pain. I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it.
So, where does this leave us? Seemingly, the Star Wars legacy is tarnished and beyond repair. The fan base is irreparably scarred, and Disney knew this film was so awful that they immediately postponed all their films to take a step back and reflect at what got us to this point. Where do we go from here? And I'm not the only person that's had this thought. Comments on my own videos in the past have talked about how awful this film was, that it's ruined other people's love of Star Wars. It's really funny that when I walked into the movie theater for The Force Awakens, I was a wide-eyed teenager blown out of the water. And now that I've seen the finale to this trilogy, I'm in my 20s, cynical, and sad at the way this trilogy went out. Star Wars didn't go out with a bang, it went out with a whimper after a gradual cacophony of bad corporate decisions that hampered the visions of the filmmakers, when there was no overarching vision to start with. I remember leaving the theater in absolute disbelief, looking to rationalize this film in any way that I could and convince myself that this trilogy was planned and that this film was good. There are even rumors that J.J. Abrams had a completely different cut that was much longer than the finale we got, and it explained a lot of plot holes and made them acceptable and even logical, such as how allegedly Leia was projecting Han's image onto the Endor moon, and just like Luke, the energy it took killed her, thus this is why she died. If the story is true, especially Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger, if their element of collusion in this story is true, they really did take this series and car crash it into a wall willingly while giving us all the bird. These stories become even more upsetting when you realize about how Bob Iger boned George Lucas and told him that they would use his story treatments for the sequels. They then bought his IP under that verbal assumption and kindly told him to pluck his balls when the deal was finished instead of opting to fly by the seat of their pants. They would never recognize the prequels, they threw out George's vision, created new characters instead of gradually introducing them. Look, it was clear that while The Force Awakens is pretty great, it was manufactured to be great, and that's not a redundant statement. It was factory constructed to be as good as it was. There was no artistic vision. And it's a shame because retrospectively, I see that while the filmmakers and actors were passionate, their passion could only take them so far because they were working within the constraints of the company. It was clear that while The Last Jedi took risks and took the franchise in a new direction, it threw off the safe corporate trail of retreading the original trilogy, and it's now painfully obvious that that retread was always the plan. Star Wars fans should demand, no, ask for better content, and it seems like it's finally happening. Maybe this movie was a good thing in disguise. Look, as tempting as it may be to slide down the slippery slope to saying that Disney ruined Star Wars and wiped its ass with the legacy of the prior 6 films, I think it's important that we look forward with hope at the horizon. I mean, this movie bombed everywhere, and I view this as a point of inflection for the saga. Nobody liked this film. The Mandalorian Season 1, though, was great. The Clone Wars finally got a great final season. Mandalorian's second season is right on the horizon. Star Wars Battlefront 2 is now finally an excellent shooter. And the prospect of movies set in an entirely new era with an entirely clean slate sets the filmmakers free to do their own thing. Why is it that while I don't like Rise of Skywalker that much, I don't think it ruined the entire franchise, though? Look, at this point, Star Wars movies are a type of film, right? Episodes 1, 2, 4, 6, 7, and 9 are all really similar stories about doomsday weapons, exploding Star Destroyers, a big Jedi lightsaber fight, and characters coming of age and discovering their destiny. Arguably 2 of the best films in the saga, those being Empire and Revenge of the Sith, are as good as they are because they did something so staggeringly different, and it paid off and added more to the universe and overarching narrative. I mean, shit, depending who you ask, I'd even lump The Last Jedi in that category. The downside to this movie being such a corporate imitation of a Star Wars movie has shown me how ultimately silly and simple the majority of these movies are on a film-to-film comparison. But this doesn't mean that Star Wars isn't valuable. In fact, I believe the opposite. I stand by what I said in the introduction to the overall series way back in the first video. These movies are better than the majority of things coming out in theaters or in a television set. I'd rather sit through The Rise of Skywalker than Minions because at least the cast, crew, and VFX artists seem to care. I mean, look, the only reason we hold these movies up on the pedestals we do is because they're Star Wars movies. If The Rise of Skywalker was a generic action movie, it would have been mediocre and forgotten within a couple months, but we hold the IP to a higher standard than that, and for good reason. For different reasons to some, but the same conclusion, The Rise of Skywalker has elicited reactions from people ranging from sadness to absolute vitriol. I'm feeling hopeful for the future of this brand. I'm ultimately glad we got to see a sequel trilogy at all. I'm grateful that we got to see a version of Ben Solo that focused on the best aspects of what Anakin Skywalker's character was trying to be. Despite her flaws with writing, I'm glad that little girls finally did get to see a Jedi female to look up to. I'm glad that Mark Hamill got 2 movies to develop Luke's character in a meaningful way, and I'm glad that at the very least, I got to see Ian McDiarmid say "do it" one more time on screen. It's funny that I'm at the end of the road now. My opinions on these movies have matured and evolved in the process of writing these critiques, and it's kind of funny that these videos have helped me get to know the Star Wars community so much better than I used to. I no longer see nothing but the people who rate The Force Awakens a 0 on Metacritic. I no longer see Star Wars fans whose best counter-arguments against The Last Jedi are that Rey is a Mary Sue SJW Hillary Clinton plant, and I see fans that are mellow enough to find things to laugh about in The Rise of Skywalker. As tricky as it may be, I see a renaissance in Star Wars, a new beginning, and a fresh start to the franchise, an awakening of the franchise, you could say. Sure, The Rise of Skywalker really took the sequel trilogy and put it through an industrial wood chipper, but if it leads to the potential Star Wars renaissance we're in at the moment, and inspires better films in the future, then that makes it great. But, you see, unlike my last video on The Last Jedi, that isn't enough. It hurts that our franchise is damaged and fractured, but the missteps of this movie can never invalidate the strong emotional connection we have to this franchise, no matter which films you love. Nobody, nothing, and no thought alone can take the power of those emotional connections away. The hurt you feel over The Rise of Skywalker, it's warranted. Sure, it's depressing to think about the movie now, and how it seemingly drug your franchise through the dirt with no respect. But if there's anything life teaches us, it's that time heals all wounds.
Thomas, you were right about me. After all they did, you can still love Star Wars. Tell your fan base, you were right.